Hey guys, so it's been a rough couple of weeks for us, but we're back and we're going to keep putting out interviews to hopefully encourage you to keep playing music and keep practicing and refining your skills. But also in response to what's going on, please, please, please keep signing petitions and sharing information and educating yourself and also those around you to just be a voice for those who are silenced in light of everything that's going on.
Hey guys, welcome back to Encouraging Teens, the music scene. Thank you guys so much for joining us again. My name is Joy.
And my name is Bea. And for our fourth guest, we have an incredible musician and teacher who has had a lot of experience in music school, gigging, and traveling. So let us introduce you to Marcelo.
Woo!
Could you start off by telling us some background information about yourself?
My name's Marcelo Perez. I was born in Berkeley and raised mostly in Berkeley, but also Oakland, California. And I started playing drums when I was 5. My stepmom was in a rock band, and she got a drum set, and then I started just gravitating towards it when I was 5 and started playing, and I've been playing ever since. I also played the trumpet when I was in middle school and elementary school, and I stopped doing that in high school. And now I also play a bit of piano. And in middle school and high school, I got into Cuban percussion like timbales, congas, bongo. And since then, I've also dipped into bata drumming in Cuba. So I try to dip my hands in as many things as possible, but I'm mostly focused on drum set. And the other things are kind of just to supplement and enjoy music more and to deepen my understanding of music and stuff like that. I'm 25. I turned 25 2 days ago.
Woo! Happy birthday!
Thank you. Thank you. So, yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Cool. Well, Bea's been telling me a lot about how you continued with like music education and you went to school for it and all of that. So I was wondering to start out if you could like tell our listeners a little bit about the decision to continue with music and to go to college for it.
Yeah, well, was really fortunate when I decided to go to college. I knew I was going to go to school. I didn't know for what. So in high school, I applied to a bunch of different schools, mostly music schools, but also some schools that would be more focused on like academics. I was thinking of like political science or international relations, something like that. So I was actually not sure if I was going to do music in school or something else. And that decision also doesn't necessarily determine what you're going to do with your life. Like I know a lot of people who went and studied some academic field thing like mathematics or biology who actually end up playing music professionally. So it's not like the decision of what you're going to study in college determines what you're going to do after that. So even though I was applying to other schools not for music, that doesn't mean that I was going to not continue to try to become a musician. But I got a really amazing scholarship at the University of Miami. There's this program called the Stamps Scholars, and it happens every 4 years, and it's a really amazing scholarship. And so because of that, even though I got into some really good academic schools and was really on the fence about whether I wanted to study, one of the things I described, or if I wanted to go and study music in a school, the scholarship really made it hard to turn down it was just like, it was hard. It was impossible to turn down. So I decided to go to music school for that reason primarily, and I think it was a great decision. And I got a degree in I got a bachelor's in music. I got my major was jazz percussion or jazz performance, and then with like a percussion emphasis, which is pretty much your classic degree that you'll get from a music school if you play drums. They call it percussion, I guess, just to be sound fancy. Um, so that's what I got my undergrad in, and that's primarily what I studied. But you have to study a lot of different things when you're in school. And I actually went on and got a master's degree at the New England Conservatory. For masters, I only applied to music schools because at that point I realized that's the only thing I really wanted to study. So I didn't apply to any academic kind of thing. And again, I got a good scholarship to NEC, and so it kind of made the decision for me. Although I think it was uh, a really good choice whether or not I had gotten a scholarship to go to that school.
Well, with being a jazz musician or honestly any musician, you kind of have to have a certain drive to keep up with all the work and the course load. So how do you think you stayed motivated while you were attending school?
Um, well, I found that inspiration would kind of come and go. So some weeks you'd be feeling really inspired and want to practice a lot. Um, and then some weeks would be really hard and you'd kind of just have to like slog through everything and just show up and do your best, even though you weren't super excited. Um, uh, I think a very general pattern for students, like friends I've talked to, and this happened for me. I'll speak of my experience mostly. Like my freshman year, I was so excited to be there, and I practiced so much and did my very best and like applied myself. And then about halfway through my sophomore year, I really started to lose inspiration and drive and motivation. And I just felt, I think sophomore year is like a really hard year because you've been there a while, but you're not even over the hump yet. So there's still so much school left. So they call it the sophomore slump, like it's a thing.
Aw.
And for me, I mean, actually, to be completely honest, I almost left school. I almost dropped out. Um, I made a decision to stop going to school my second semester of sophomore year because I really wasn't happy in school, and I felt like I could be doing a better job getting at music outside of school. But then like after making that decision, I decided like right at the end of the semester that I actually wanted to stay. And I think that was one of the best decisions I've made in my life, deciding to stay in school, especially because junior year was actually a really amazing year. I learned so much and there was so much opportunity. Um, for me, in undergrad and grad, it was really hard. It was not easy, but you kind of just have to prioritize your mental health. Like I exercised a lot, um, and I would cook for myself and try to feed myself well and make sure to socialize and hang out with friends, do fun things. So I actually, I worked pretty hard. You always beat yourself up because you're like, I could have done better. I could have worked harder, but I worked hard and I worked hard to keep my mental health like steady and solid. And that's what got me through it. Trying to trying to have a balanced life in school.
How would you say, like the making the connections that you made at school, since you're from the West Coast and going out there to the East Coast, how would you say that has helped you in general with um, either performing or just developing your musicality?
Um, so the connections I think are huge. It's probably yeah, I mean, the connections and the what I learned are definitely like the two main things that I gained. Um, I mean, the other thing is kind of grit, which is important, like the ability to push through hard times because you're challenged a lot in school. So those three things, connections wise, if I was kind of thinking sophomore year when I was thinking of dropping out, I was thinking of just moving to New York and um, trying to just get on the scene and meet people and start working. Um, who knows what would have happened and how that would have gone. But since I stayed in school, I got to know really high level professional musicians, um, some of the best musicians in the world, the teachers, and I made connections with them. And also, I made connections with so many students who are really talented and who are now out of school and pursuing professional career jobs. So the connections I made were huge. Like, I mean, I don't have any connections on the East Coast other than institutionalized music connections, pretty much. I know a few people from the Bay Area who moved to New York, um, that I know from like high school who are doing great things out there. Um, but other than that, everyone that I know who's in New York, um, I met through college or grad school. I think that is going to make the move much easier. I'm going to have a lot of people that I can let know I'm there, and hopefully work starts up from that. And again, like the high level professional connections I made were huge. Like for example, I got to work with Gonzalo Rubalcaba at because he's a adjunct faculty, and then he hired me to play with him at a jazz festival the summer after I graduated. So like that kind of professional opportunity is really amazing, and it wouldn't have happened if I left school. So then there's a bass player, Oscar Stagnaro, who I got to work with, who I met, who was introduced to me by a pianist, Alex Brown, who I met when I was in Miami, who was a student. So who knows what would have happened if I didn't go to school? Like I'm sure I would have made other connections and other things would have happened. But I'm very grateful for that. As far as musicality or kind of development and like what I learned about music in music school, again, I think the main thing was who I studied with on drum set. I got to study with Daphne Prieto, Billy Hart, and Bob Moses. Um, and I know that I never would have taken as many lessons with those people as I got to. I think if I was out of school, I probably would have taken one or two from each of them and kind of gotten their philosophy and gotten some tips on what to do. Mm-hmm. But I did 2 semesters with Daphnis, which was like, um, you know, lots of hours of time with him. And then I did 2 years with Bob Moses and a year with Billy Hart. So that's a lot of time, and I learned so much from them. And at least with Billy, so I don't think I would have had the opportunity to get to know him and get to study with him if it wasn't for me being at New England Conservatory. Also, ear training classes are really helpful. I don't think I would have gone that deep into ear training if I wasn't forced to. And I learned a ton about how to like improve my ear melodically, mostly, and harmonically. Yeah, I just got exposed to so many different things that I wouldn't have been exposed to. So that was huge. And yeah, grateful for all of that.
How do you think you made all of those like really useful connections with your teachers? Like, how do you prove to them that you're a professional in the industry, but at the same time, like, you want them to know that they're like your mentors and you respect them, but you also want them to kind of see you as like another musician?
Uh-huh. Yeah. I think I made it really clear to all those people that I really wanted to work with them. So I took extra time like asking them questions and for example, we would do a rehearsal, and at the end of the rehearsal, I'd be like, hey, like, is there anything, I could be doing better? Just like asking little tips, like, and usually they'll have something to say, like, oh, like, it sounds really good, and like, you could actually do this little thing. And just showing that attention to detail, I think, goes a long way. And it shows that you like respect their artistry and their knowledge, and that you want to know more about what they think. But again, it's just like, just being professional, like showing up on time to rehearsals, um, playing as well as you can every time, learning the music before. So when you show up, you already know the music pretty well. Um, and all these things are actually really hard to do in school because you have so many other things to juggle, um, like academic classes and stuff. But I definitely would prioritize those opportunities over school like stuff, um, because I thought it was more important. I think a big thing with those two schools too is like there's not a huge professional workforce. Like in New York, there's probably 1,000 amazing drummers or something like that. In Miami, it's a much smaller scene. So like Gonzalo is in Miami, and for him to get a drummer, like he could get a New York drummer, but he'd have to fly that person down to work with him and then rehearse and like figure out how to. But since I was in Miami, we could rehearse for 2 weeks, and he didn't have to worry about like where I was going to stay or flying me down, because he lives in Miami. So that helps a lot because there's a smaller pool of people he could hire in Miami to work. So I think that's a big part of the opportunities I got as well, is just because I was in the area and they needed someone to work, and then they thought that I was a good drummer and they trusted me to do a good job, so then they gave me work.
Once you get that opportunity to like play with them and you've sort of started that relationship with them, how do you go about keeping that?
Um, I guess just staying in touch. For me, I haven't done a very good job keeping a professional relationship with the people I've worked with, mostly because I've been moving around a lot. I think if I were to have stayed in Miami, I may have worked more with Gonzalo. Actually, I think I probably would have, because he mentioned that he had ideas for us to work more together. And same with other people in Miami. And then when I went to Boston, like with Oscar Stagnaro, like we had a bunch of gigs, and then I left for the summer, and then I think he had to find another drummer to work with him. And then once you start working with someone else, it's like, why am I going to go back to the person that I was working with before if I found someone else? Or like, why am I going to get gigs if my band isn't in town? So it's really important to stay in one city, I would say. And like, if you want to get on the scene, to make sure people know that you're there and that you're going to be there. And I never did that, because I always wanted to come home and be with family. And I didn't stay in Miami because I wanted to go to grad school. So I went to Boston, and then I didn't stay in Boston because I didn't want to stay there. So I think that was, that's a big reason why I don't work professionally with those people regularly now. Um, but I learned a ton from working with them professionally, and it was an amazing opportunity. And I might with them again. I hope so. Uh, there is one band, this bass player who's a professor at U Miami, Tim Smith, who really loves playing with me, and we have a really good connection. And he actually made a band, and I'm in it. And like, I fly down to Miami a couple times a year, and we either do like a mini tour or we record an album. So that is one connection that I have maintained, and that we still work a lot together. So sometimes you keep them, if people really like what you do, and it's worth it to them to bring you down to Miami or bring you back to Boston to do things.
So, how would you work on balancing and prioritizing either those music opportunities, or part two of the question, or just making sure that your mental health was stable? Because, like you said, you were doing other things that were outside of the music bubble, like So what were some things that you did that helped you in those situations?
Mm, well, I'd say I always put those like professional opportunities first because like a lot of, like if I do well professionally, it's good for my mental health. Like that would make me feel good and feel like I'm doing good things. So those two things kind of went hand in hand.
Mhm.
Um, da, da. So I didn't do a perfect job though. I did my best, but I definitely didn't always show up to rehearsals prepared and like ready to play really well. And some friendships were kind of on strain because of that. Like I had some friends who were disappointed that they didn't think I was working hard enough, and they were frustrated with like the way I was playing. Um, but you know, you can't win them all, and sometimes I definitely prioritized my mental health and being happy uh, over playing well in every situation. But when I had like a high opportunity, like when Gonzalo would come in and see a rehearsal,
Mhm.
be very prepared. Or working with Daphne's, I'd be very prepared for our lessons. So I just, I definitely prioritized some opportunities and did my best there, and then others I kind of bit the bullet and didn't do my very best in order for me to do my very best, like in other ways, like yeah, being happy, enjoying. I was in Miami, like enjoying what Miami has to offer. It's a beautiful place. So like you only live once, right? Like it's a balance of working really hard and also enjoying life. I feel I'm so privileged to like have so much opportunity, so many people are just living paycheck to paycheck and trying to survive. And
Mhm.
I was born where I had more ability to like try to become a drummer. And so I got a good scholarship to go to school. So yeah, I mean, I feel like I have so much privilege. So, you know, enjoy life too.
Yeah. Yeah. Not get super caught up in all the music stuff and how you're sounding, but also enjoy the moments.
They feed each other too, if you're happy, your music's going to be better. And if you're working from a place of kind of joy all the time and love, like I think practicing when you're really loving it is a better time used than practicing when you're just doing it um, just to kind of put in the hours.
Yeah.
That's not to say that putting in hours is really important and really great, but I think it's better to have a really focused hour than a really distracted 3 hours. I think you could actually really maximize your time.
Hmm. So what have you done to maximize your time? Like how is your way what is your way of making sure you focus so much on that 1 hour rather than
Hmm.
in those 3 hours?
I turn practicing into a game because games are fun usually. So like I put limits on myself of what I can do. So like when I'm practicing technique, it's like how perfect can my hands look, and like how straight can my back be, and how consistently can I breathe, and how relaxed can my arms be. And it's kind of a game of like how well I can hold this, like how well I can hold the sticks and like do everything. Or
Hmm.
when I'm working with a metronome, it's like can I how well can I make it disappear every time. And I do a lot of games with the metronome where like it's not like every beat, it's like on the and of four every two measures, or on two every measure, or every two measures, so that you're not depending on the metronome to give you the time, but you're giving the time, and then the metronome's kind of asserting that you're in the right place. So
Yeah.
there's like different games you can do and challenges. um, and then the ultimate practicing is like being creative and developing ideas and playing.
Hmm.
And then that's a game too. Like I think putting limits is really good, because if you just sit on the drum set and it's like I can do absolutely anything, and I can focus on absolutely anything, there's so many things to focus on and so many different sounds you can get and So when you put limits on what you can do, like I'm only going to play on the high tom and on the snare drum, and I'm going to like create a groove, and then I'm going to solo on those two drums. Like then it's like a game. It's really fun. And if you spend a long time doing that, then when you add other things, like the world of possibilities feels a lot bigger. So then it's really fun to add more drums and more things. But yeah, I just try to keep it fun because I feel like if I'm having fun, that's like the most genius stuff comes out when I'm having fun. You know,
Yeah.
like definitely playing in like playing in a band when we're having a really good time and having a lot of fun. I feel like that's when my brain is really focused and really like performing at the highest level that it can. So that's how I maximize my time. I try to bring love to it. You know, I'm like, I love doing this. Like, this is really fun. Like, I'm sitting in front of a mirror, like doing a single stroke roll, and like, I love this. You know, like trying to bring that kind of positive energy to it.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing because sometimes it's harder to get your ideas out or even be focused when you're worried about like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna sound bad, or oh, I don't want to do this right now. You know, you gotta love what you do, and we do love what we do. If
Yeah.
we didn't, we would not be here.
How about we talk a little bit about why you chose to get into teaching? Because you went from school to more school and some gigging and stuff, and now
Okay.
teaching.
Um, I teach once a week, so it's not a big part of my life. Um, I prioritize my playing and like being on the scene over teaching right now, but I really do love teaching. And
Mhm.
I think the main reason I got into it was financial. Like it really helps supplement um, living somewhere and paying the bills.
True.
But at the same time, like I really do enjoy it. Like it's a lot of fun, and I feel like uh, fulfilled doing it because I feel like I'm passing on information to the next generation and am inspiring
Hmm.
people and getting people excited about music. So it's really great. And that's like the like plus of getting a degree or getting degrees is really the ability to teach at different levels. It's hard to
Okay.
get certain jobs without degrees teaching. So I'm using those degrees for sure to my advantage to find teaching opportunities.
Yeah.
Um, and like I said, that's really helping pay the bills, and it feels good to do and it's fun to do. So it just kind of fell into place, you know, the teaching job,
Yeah.
and I'm really grateful for it.
Yeah. Well, you said that you like to focus on gigging more. Can you tell our listeners slash me, because I don't know you as well as Bea does, a little bit about like what gigs you do?
Mhm. Um, so I moved back to Oakland at the end of my time at New England Conservatory. So around June 2019. And the main reason I came back was actually I had been given a concert at SF Jazz um, in January. So I needed time and space to um, write original music for it and just
Mhm.
prepare the whole concert. And then um, I didn't know where I wanted to live yet. So coming home just made a lot of sense. And then once I got here, I started getting involved in different bands, connections I had from high school. My friend Akil Mestayer, who's a great percussionist, recommended me for a couple of bands and a couple different people. So I started working with this guitarist, David Lechuga, a lot, who's now one of my best friends. He's a great jazz and Cuban music guitarist. Um, yeah, once I got here, people started to know I was here and started to ask me to work with them. And then on top of that, one of the big bands that I was a part of, and hopefully there'll be more gigs soon, is with this band called the Rebirth Canal, and that's led by Camille Mai, who's a great pianist and vocalist, and she wrote a ton of original music. And we played probably like 5 shows in the Bay Area. Most of these like performance gigs happen at like the California Jazz Conservatory, or we did one like these different gigs at like Diablo Valley College or the Red Poppy House. um, yeah, different stuff in different places, like different kind of more like concert hall gigs, which are the more fun ones, kind of. And then we got invited to play at the Havana Jazz Festival, the Rebirth Canal. So we went out there in January and performed at the Havana Jazz Festival. And um,
Sick.
other than that, I work a lot of like restaurants and bars. um, Not a lot. I mean, it takes time to get into a scene, like,
Mhm.
and I feel like I was just starting to break into it right when COVID hit. So I was just trying to get recommended
Dang.
for more dates. So that was like I had been in the Bay Area for 7 months or 8 months. But I was working. I probably had like 2 gigs a week, like
Mhm.
at bars and restaurants, and that's really helpful. And then I had those kind of bigger concert hall gigs from time to time. So that's what my professional working career in the Bay Area has looked like since I got out of school. And a huge part of it is also like I would go out to the jam sessions like every night that I could, because I really
Yes.
enjoy the social aspect, and I enjoy hearing other people play, and I enjoy other bands, and I enjoy playing with people. I like the
Mhm.
hang a lot. It's a lot of fun for me. So I would go out every opportunity I could to just kind of be a part of the scene. And I think that did help me like make connections with certain people, to play with certain people, and they got to know me. And so
So, how would you say, aside from the people that you knew or the connections that you made, um, well, since you started getting into the gigging, um, what's that word? Joy, help me out. Like the gigging world. Um,
Scene.
scene. There we go. How would you say you yourself worked on getting your gigs?
I have never really been a huge person like who like reaches out to restaurants and bars and is like, yo, I'm a musician, like here's my CD, like hire me. Never dedicated time to that, and
Mhm.
respect people who do. Like that's amazing. And a lot of gigs that I have gotten is from because someone did that work. Actually, all of them. Like someone at some point was like, yo, it'd be great if you had live music. And then because of that person's work, like I'm working. So I'm really grateful for people who do that. The only gig I had that was my gig this past year was the show at SF Jazz.
Mhm.
And they reached out to me, which was amazing. And that's because of me being in the SF Jazz All Stars. So they already knew me, and staying in touch with Rebecca Maleone. And they kind of were following what I was doing in Boston and in Miami, and they
Mhm.
decided to give me work. So, um, yeah, I've been very fortunate that things kind of just worked out for me in that way.
Earlier, you kind of mentioned the whole COVID situation. Maybe you could give our listeners a little bit of like words of wisdom for how you're staying motivated and how you're keeping up with practicing and all of that.
I mean,
That's a
I
hard
don't,
one.
it is, but for some reason for me, it's been really easy to stay motivated. Like, I'm just so grateful to have this time. I've never had this much time on my hands, like to just practice.
Mhm.
So I just practice as much as I can. And um, I feel bad because, I mean, words of wisdom, I guess, like stay inspired, like listen to music, you know, get a vision for where you want to go, like set some goals and
Mhm.
try to do that. Um, I talk a lot. I FaceTime a lot of friends all the time, so I stay pretty social and like have a lot of time, a lot of fun time.
Mhm.
Um, but get your drums sounding good. Spend time tuning your drums. If your drums sound good, you're going to be more inspired to play them. They're going to be more fun to play. So I suggest that. I think recording yourself, like if you could get like even one nice condenser mic, this was like $150, $120. And like I can get a pretty good recording. And if you start recording yourself, you get inspired because you're like, oh, like it could be better. Like, let me work on that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And definitely recording projects, like friends sending me music like, yo, put drums on this. And I'm like, oh, that's super cool. Like, I'd love to. Like, those things keep me inspired to
Mm-hmm.
record and work on stuff.
Good.
When COVID's over, I'm going to move to New York and I'm going to try to just work as a drummer. So I just feel like I have a big goal of like being a high level professional. So all this practicing and stuff is leading towards me, being able to get gigs and people recommending me and being able to survive and live as a drummer. So I'm very motivated, inspired. When I was in high school, I was really motivated by the idea of going to college and going to music school.
Mm-hmm.
So the summer before senior year, I practiced a lot. Like that's all I did. The other summers I worked doing different stuff. So like I had jobs. But then that summer I decided to not work and to just practice. And it was huge. Like I got way better and it worked out. But that incentive of like, I want to go to music school and like more, I wanted to get a scholarship to music school. Let me
Mm-hmm.
practice a lot to be able to accomplish that goal. So kind of having like it's definitely hard. There was a moment when I was like, what's the point in practicing? Like, it's going to be like a year before anyone hears what I have worked on,
Uh-huh.
you know? So it's good to like keep like this idea of like, well, eventually I'm really going to need these skills.
Mm-hmm.
So let me put in work. That's
Yeah.
how I've stayed motivated. But I feel very lucky that I haven't had to work very hard to just be motivated and enjoy. Again, making it fun. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not like, oh shit, I gotta practice. It's like, oh shit, I get to practice. This is gonna be great. So,
Yeah. How do you think you go about making realistic goals for yourself though? Because you said that like in high school you were looking forward to going to college. How do you go about keeping like big goals and big dreams, but like achievable ones?
Yes.
um, it's funny. Like I have friends who have these goals that are like so ambitious and kind of, it's like, to me, it's like a little bit out of reality, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, like it could happen. Like they could make it happen, you know. Who am I to say that it's not possible? um but for me, I try. There's people who would say that about me though too. There's people who would say like, oh, he has these dreams that like that's a little bit out of reality, you know. But like you can you can do it. Like if you believe in yourself and you work hard, I think you can make most goals happen. And it's also good to just talk to people to see what other people have done.
Mm-hmm.
Like um, if Gonzalo Rubalcaba's touring the world, playing with all these different people, and he has time to practice 6 hours a day and does, and like has a family with a bunch of kids, like that means that, I mean, like someone did it. So even though it's really hard to do, someone did it, you know? So it's
Yeah.
possible. And I also reconcile the fact that like Gonzalo is like ridiculous. Like he was so amazing at like 17, and like you hear his music from when he was that age, like he was already leading a band and writing all this music and had incredible musicians in his band. So kind of comparing where you're at and then being like, well, I could do this. Um, so like seeing what other people have done and then being like, okay, well, this is possible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think like my drum teachers, like they each, for example, they each have their own sound. Like they each have their own identity. Um, they each have worked a lot as sidemen, but they have also produced their own albums and have had their own bands or have their own bands. Um, and each of them teaches at a high level university.
Mhm.
So like I look at that and I'm like, okay, well, like that's a realistic goal. Like it's not going to be easy, and maybe I don't teach at New England Conservatory. Maybe I teach at like uh I don't know, a community college or something. Like maybe it's not that high level, but like it's possible. Like I could do that. If that's really what I wanted to do, I could do everything I could to make that happen, and it's possible. So um just kind of seeing what other people have done informs a lot like what I think I can do. And um but then, you know, I definitely have some dreams that like my graduate drum recital. Like I got Billy Hart, Bob Moses, and Daphnis, my three teachers, to come to Boston, and we did an all drum concert.
Yeah, we need to put that link somewhere so people can see that.
Yeah.
That is crazy. Sorry, go ahead.
That was a dream I had that was like probably a bunch of people would say that's not possible or something.
Mhm.
It was definitely not normal at New England Conservatory to do that. And I got a little bit of pushback, like maybe you shouldn't, you should do something different. I did it, and it was possible, and it happened. It was a lot of organizing and fundraising, and so believe in yourself. You know, you can
Mhm.
do it.
Yeah, I think it helps a lot to take inspiration from other people and to see what they have done. Um, that can also inspire you to go for your goals and see what you want to do.
Yeah.
Have mentors, you know, like so like if I'm like, well, how did you record your first album?
Hmm.
Like, oh, I raised money and I found my engineer and, you know, blah blah blah. They tell you how they did it, and then all of a sudden that dream of yours becomes so much more feasible. You're like, oh, okay, well, this is how they did it, so I can do that. Like,
Hmm.
How do you think that same philosophy as of like having mentors applies to your playing? Like just getting influence from the teachers that you had in university or different teachers that you've had throughout life?
mm-hmm. I think they've each left their mark on me as far as like my style goes, and I like um I'm like proud of that, you know.
Hmm.
uh and you know, I studied with this drummer Josh Jones here in the Bay Area for like a long time, like 10 years. I started taking lessons when I was 6, and I studied with him until I think I was 16 or 17. So like there's licks that he showed me that I use today that like are like a stamp for sure of like him being my teacher.
Hmm.
And like the styles that I got into, like he got me into Afro-Cuban music. So like I'm into that music because he kind of got me going with that. So all my teachers have influenced me in like what I'm interested in and what I practice. So uh, I talked to Billy about like how he got his own sound, and he was like, you know, from who I worked with is a huge part of it. Like the different gigs I got, they influenced a lot of how they wanted me to play and how I played. And then
Yeah.
a bunch of it for him is also like the licks that he has. Like he has like probably 8 or 10 licks that he collected from different parts of his life that people showed him. And like those became like kind of his stamps of like, this is who I am, you know? So taking that uh, philosophy of like, oh, like there's like certain licks I have, like, and that's a whole other conversation. Cause like some people would say that Keith Jarrett, for example, like doesn't have any licks, but you know his sound and like you know how he plays and stuff.
Hmm.
So then there's the whole thing of like, well, does licks, you know, what's should you or should you not use licks? But I think a lot of musicians have licks that kind of that have say like kind of not define who they are, but allow you to listen and be like, oh, that's this person because I know that they like to play that.
Hmm.
So I learned that from Billy, and like I'm interested in learning his licks, not so that I sound like him, but so that like I can show people like Billy Hart. Like I can teach people like this is like Billy Hart. He's my teacher, and like, you know, this is his thing. And like, yeah, when I play, like I might throw in a Billy Hart lick to kind of be like, that's my dude. You know, like I love the way he plays, and he inspired me, and I loved this lick that he plays.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you should have your own sound and your own licks, but I think it's okay to kind of come to show that you come from something.
Yeah, because we definitely, yeah, that's a big thing. Almost like paying homage to those who either taught us or were before us, because so many musicians have inspired so many people from years ago, and just creating music and being where you are. And I think it's also, like you said, either taking their licks or incorporating it to your own music, or your own playing, and also making it your own, whether you're a drummer or a guitarist or a bass player.
Totally right.
Do you have any like one more piece of advice or any advice you'd like to give to the listeners just to close it out?
Yeah. I was thinking as far as school goes, like I'm really glad I went to school, and I think it opened up so many doors for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm even thinking of doing like a PhD at some point.
Wow.
Yeah.
And like I'm thinking, like honestly, like the PhD, I'm thinking of doing like kind of studying musics of like Latin America and the United States and Africa, and kind of comparing and seeing that, focusing on drum set. I don't want anyone to steal my idea though. Maybe I should.
I took it already. I think I wrote that down.
No, the more
True.
people who do it, the better, you know. So, but like that wouldn't be possible if I didn't get an undergrad and a master's.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like there's amazing musicians who have incredible careers who didn't go to school. But my path was like school, and I thought it was great. But everyone has their own path, so
Exactly.
I decide not to go to school. Like I'm sure if I didn't go to school, other things would have happened, and who knows what they would have been. But
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's always a different path for each person,
Mm-hmm.
school-wise or without school.
Cool. You want to do the outro or? Okay, I'll do the outro. Thank you guys so much for listening. We had a ton of fun talking to Marcelo. We definitely learned a lot about music, school, and staying motivated. Basically everything. We touched a little bit on everything. If you enjoyed this episode, please go back and listen to our first 3, and please continue tuning in. We have a ton of really cool things set up for the future. Please follow us on Instagram at ETMS Podcast. And if you're listening on YouTube, please leave comments or questions or anything down below. We'll try and get to those.
For sure. So thank you guys. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Marcelo.
I mean,
You too.
Oh yeah, thank you, Marcelo. Thank you.